Welcome back, you filthy exiles. So, we played something a little different over the last few days, and you guys would have seen it in stream last night. I think I was playing last night. Yeah, I was playing last night. I'm forgetting the days. Anyway, uh, we stumbled across this just looking for like flame blast builds, and it turns out there's this really cool item called Atziri's Rule. And basically, what this does is it triggers two skills, which is one being Queen's Demand, which has Flames of Judgment, and Storm of Judgment, which are the same skills that Atziri actually casts within the with when you verse Uber Atziri. So it got me thinking, okay, cool. Oh, the other added advantage of this staff cannot be stunned and damage cannot be reflected. So it can run all reflect maps and don't have to worry about stun and any ascendancy that requires that. So two big stats off the table. Basically, you can walk into anything and do whatever. So anyway, I got to thinking, how could I make this work? So I had a look at a couple of trees. And then, yeah, I have been working at this all day, minning and maxing and making a lot of mistakes across the way, but I think we're there. So basically, this cycles two skills, and we'll just go into the main area because it's a huge AoE you would have seen at the start. First being, this is, Storm of Judgment, and that does like 2.7 mil ignite right now, according to POB. And then we have our Fire Blast, our Atziri Fire Blast. So this is a Fire Blast build. Now, that triggers automatically once you hit the button. It automatically triggers it. I'm not holding anything down when I cast that. And that's the way that the Atziri skill works. So the way that that scales off of is basically off of less duration support and cast speed. And we'll talk about upgrades at the very end of this video because I have a big upgrade for this, which is going to make it even crazier. So anyway, that's how this skill pretty much works. And then from there, we're just stacking gratuitous amounts of ignites. Now, I'm not sure how this skill scales damage, but it is at a enormous level because right now, this tree that I've got, and this is a level 94 tree, the only difference is this extra blowback node and flow of life node, which is what I'm going to be targeting, is at 8.756 million ignite dot right now. I'm pretty sure I can get it to 10 with Awaken Jewels. I've got no Awaken Jewels in this build yet. Like, this is just on a whole different level. Anyway, talking for survivability, which was the other problem I was running into, we've got about 1400 life regen per second, and that's legit. Like, that's not bullshit. 1233 currently with the current tree, and then we run a Surging Vitality, which gives us every 4 seconds, 10% of our total overall life is regenerated, which means if you're kiting around and killing bosses, and if you have to run away from a boss, then you'll get all your life back within seconds. And then on top of that, we're using some synergies here, Elixir of the Unbroken Circle to proc endurance charges. We're also running Enduring Cry, and I need to add Infernal Cry back into the build because I made a bit of a mistake here, so this is going to be an Infernal Cry setup down here. So we get Ash on enemies. So pretty much like across the board. And by the way, we're running Arcanus brand with Wave of Conviction as well, to basically do increased burning damage over time. But yeah, pretty much that's how the build works. You were seeing at the start, it's taken down Shape Art, it's taken down Elder, it's taken down Sirus, it's taken down duo boss runs. Basically how I've been farming currency is basically smashing boss maps with this. And it just kills bosses. It just rips them apart with fire. It's glorious. Anyway, so let's get into the build. I'll talk about the gearing first, then we'll talk about the gem setups, then we'll talk about everything else, and then we'll talk about the upgrades that I'll have coming into the build at the very end, and the skill tree and all that sort of jazz, and the Pantheon as well. All of it I've trolled and erred and made countless amounts of mistakes with today until I've finally gotten it right. You'll ask, what's the total build cost of this build? About 10x, 10 to 15x give or take. The only real expensive things in this entire build are the cluster jewels, and mean to say these are like 1x each now, and I was buying them for like 50 chaos each earlier today. This particular node here is dirt cheap, and this is dirt cheap as well. And then like it's like 1.5x for the Chaos Heart, and that's pretty much it. All the rest of the gear is like 1 and 2 chaos shit. The rings might be 1x if you're lucky. The Atziri's Rule is literally like 3 chaos. it's the cheapest item in the build, and it does all the damage. Barracks Respite, we're using this instead of having like ignition. Was it ignite proliferation or elemental proliferation? So you know, this is dirt cheap. 10 chaos belt. I just crafted it myself, and it was level 86 base. It can be a way better belt than this, by the way. I don't even have percentage life rolls on this. Legacy of Fury is like 4 chaos. The helm, I actually crafted everything onto it except the life rolls. So if we just looked at from that, it's like 40 chaos. All the flasks are dirt cheap. Elixir is like 10c. Gloves, again, dirt cheap. This is really just looking for dex rolls. Everything else I crafted is like 20c. And the replica foible is like 50 chaos. So like everything in this build is dirt cheap. And you'll say like, oh, you've got all these hypnotic eyes. Yep. Life and fire damage to spells is like 5 chaos. And we just stack a shitload of those within the build to do heaps of damage. That's pretty much it. That's the whole build. Anyway, let's get into the gearing and I'll talk you through it. Alright, gearing. So, obviously this is going to use Atziri's rule. Literally is the whole premise of the build. To do basically Fire Blast, Ignite Fire Blast. Now, we were playing with this before the league started. This just is gratuitous in every possible way. So we have that gives us, you know, cannot be stunned, damage cannot be reflected. That's great. So what else do we need? Well, helm-wise. The implicits on this helm I just got from Exile crafting. And by all means, like, if you can get better ones or equivalent, go crazy. Literally just farm them up and slam in the different essences and see what you get. So as the Exarch and the World Eater implicits, and see what you get. These are really powerful, best way to play the build. But the helm itself, literally just fire, lightning, resist, and life regeneration rate, and maximum life. Now, I've also got a roll here to do increased AoE. This is just crafted, requires 1 Divine Orb. And it's +1 to AoE gems. Obviously, all of my auras are AoE, so I'm getting +1 to these. Now, if I go and buy 21s, these would be level 22s. So this is just amping up my damage a little more. In my necklace or amulet, it's just the Atziri's foible. The reason why is for a couple of things. So obviously, the life regeneration rate is 22% up to 24%. Pardon me, 25%. I'm a dum-dum. 100 base, just straight up life. And we also get, every time I do videos, my nose gets itchy. And then items and gems have 25% reduced requirements. The reason why I'm using this is for a couple of reasons. Number one, just sheer survivability, like health stacking and life regeneration. So we get to like 1200 to 1300 life regen. And actually we need to re-roll that implicit. But the other reason for this is because it means I don't have to actually run any attribute modifiers within the tree. Like I don't need to actually run like these expertise nodes or anything like that. Or agility. Bloody hell. So at the expense of not having that little bit of extra dot, and this build already does like dumb amounts of dot. If I had an amulet that did more dot and could do these attributes, then that would be a benefit. I would lose a bit of survivability and do even more damage, but it's the difference between having that little bit of survivability that I find makes a difference and not, and also just the convenience of it all. So that's pretty much the reason why I use that. Now I do run charisma on it. And obviously the reason why I do that is so I can fit all my auras in. So in my ring that isn't unique, I'm running a flammability ring and just capping the rest of my resistances. Bloody hell. And my life. I did get lucky and got rarity on this one. This ring was actually not necessarily, I think this was like 1x total. Yeah, 1x with rarity. Nothing like that exists on the market currently. Don't need the rarity, but I've got it anyway. The chest piece is just a Chaos Heart. Now, you might think, oh yeah, just a standard Chaos is like 5c. But the reason why this one's 1.5x is the damage implicit. So this is a corruption roll. And this is a particularly not the highest corruption roll that I could get, but it's a good corruption roll. Anyway, it's not coming up for some reason. It's bricking. Thanks. It's like 1.52x for the chest piece. So the reason why pushes up your total health pool, gives you that increased survivability. It's got a good amount of armor on it, and 41% increased flat damage to your ignites is an added benefit of that entire setup. So then we have a Barracks Respite. The reason why we're using a Barracks Respite is pretty simple. So When you kill an ignited enemy, inflict an equivalent ignite nearby, and also the same as shock. Now, this ascendancy that we use on this, I keep thinking I'm in POB, is we use Shaper of Flames and Shaper of Storms, which is 100% ignite and 100% shock. So that means that any of those procs just shift around and kill entire packs, which is why we can blast through and just absolutely eviscerate entire screens of enemies, because it just sort of spreads like a virus through and rips through every enemy around, and then the ignite just sort of carries through and just destroys everything. So for our gauntlets, really lucked out with the Imblisters. I got 8 fire dot over time, and I also got 12% fire exposure on hit as well, which is crazy powerful on this build. But pretty much just strength, dex, life, lightning resist. These are not the best gloves that I could get on this build, but they're good enough to do what I need them to do right now. For the belt, really basic. I do have just strength. This gets to like 120 HP, chaos res, and cold res. Now, I could get a way better belt, probably a percentage belt, and that'll be an upgrade further down the track, so I think I'm going to keep playing this build as well as my RF build for delving. But yeah, really good belt, just really basic, and you could do this with a leather belt, to be honest with you, but really you need a Stygian, because I've also got a Hypnotic Eye in this bad boy, and this is giving me life regen. It's also giving me hinder to enemies on my spells, flat life, and the way that this Fire Blast or Flames of Judgment stacks is based off flat fire damage to spells. So the more flat fire damage you stack on that spell, the more fire dot you're going to do, which is why we run Anger instead of Malevolence on this build. It's just one of the unique intricacies of this particular skill. And then finally, we've got the Legacy of Fury, and this is basically, so we do Scorch to all the enemies around, which is why we just rip through enemies on maps. 8%, and then 8% of the killed enemy's life is done as fire damage to associated enemies with a 33% chance for it to carry around. It's basically like an explodey chest without being an explodey chest. Now, we're going to get this further sort of upgraded with a better enchant, most likely the cast speed enchant, which is going to mean my totem, I keep thinking totems, but my pizza, flaming pizzas, crank out even quicker. And that's pretty much it for the main gearing. And then flasks, we've just got like hinders nearby with an eternal life flask that generates charges on hit. And then a Quicksilver flask. We do have freeze immunity on this, which is really good, and it just has a craft for use when flask charges reach full. We're using a Cinder Swallow with the recover 2% life when you kill an enemy during flask effect. Don't get that confused with ES and mana. You don't need either of those. You need life. And this one costs a little bit more than the others. I think it's like maybe 10 chaos, 5 chaos. Yeah. And then we have a Granite Flask, which gives movement speed as well as 4 charges when you're hit by an enemy. And then finally, Elixir of the Unbroken Circle. So gain 1 endurance charge per second during flask effect, and when the endurance charge is used up, you get 4% of life per endurance charge. So when you use it again. So basically, as this flask pops and repops, it consumes those endurance charges and you get a shitload of life back, which is really good. It's also got an increased duration as well. It lasts for 7 seconds. And it gives you ward. So it gives you 200 ward, which gives you that little bit of extra survivability for maybe if you need 200 ward. But anyway, that's pretty much it for the gearing on this build. If you've got any questions, feel free to hit me up in the description below. So in relation to gem setups, I'll talk through each item here. So just in the helm, we're running Clarity, Defiance, Banner, Determination, and Anger. So this is like 20 to 25,000 armor. I think 22,135 armor on this build so far. It does not have mana sustain problems because we run Clarity. Now we could get, I think, an Anomalous or a Divergent Clarity, one of the two. And that would amp up my damage a little more, but that's a later investment that we'll make if we want to min-max this even higher. Then we've got Defiance Banner, my favorite skill of all time. This is going to reduce crit strike chance to nearby enemies, and it's also going to give me increased armor and evasion rating, which is going to help me stack up my armor further. Determination, no-brainer there, flat armor percent. This makes me survive those big hits that might kill me in one blow. Anger, this is then stacking just straight up fire damage and also increased AoE effect. So the reason why we don't even really need that, but The reason why we're using anger on this build and not malevolence is, as I said, the Flames of Judgment stacks or flat spell fire damage. So if you stack more spell fire damage, you'll do more damage. That's simple. Now in the staff, one thing to remember, this is a technical 7 link, which is why this build is so goddamn powerful. And because of that, because the skill is baked into the staff, you don't actually need to link the staff up because it just all links into the skill itself. So there's no 6 linking required in this build, which is why this build is incredibly powerful and really fun. If you got this like early in the, like maybe as your second build and you had a little bit of investment, you could probably get it fired up in like, 100 chaos and then basically get it to like T16 mapping in no time by just min-maxing the crafts on that, and then just switch out the gear as you go to get to pretty much this is relatively optimized here, but nowhere near, mirror level. This is like 15x level. If I had mirror level, this would be a god build. So anyway, less duration, but I've got max quant on quality on all these, so less duration, unbound ailments, we're running inspiration just for that increased elemental damage, swift affliction, burning damage, and deadly ailments. None of these are awakened, and pretty much all of these could be awakened, so the damage would go up exponentially through the roof. We easily get to like 10, 12 million dot with awakened gems. And +1 to gems doesn't work in this, or to skill gems doesn't work in this build, so there's no point running like crazy amulets or ashes or anything like that. It just doesn't work. So in the gloves, I've got Molten Shell, Vitality, Flame Dash, and Stone Golem. So we have a Stone Golem, little bro, up at all times, just buffs our life regeneration up. Molten Shell I've got mapped to my move button, so I always have it going, and that is actually a Val Molten Shell, so yeah, we need to remap that a little bit. So then we obviously have even more armor, so up to a maximum of 30,000 armor, and we just level that all the way to the top. So no cast on triggers or anything like that, none of that bullshit, just straight up move around. You've got, a guard skill up 24/7, which is great. You could technically use Steel Skin, but we're stacking Determination, so Molten Shell's better. And then in our boots, Arcanus. Arcanus brand, Wave of Conviction. This is actually going to be, again, Infernal Cry and Enduring Cry. So we are using War Cries, and this just gives us that little bit in a boss fight when we're struggling, and you can just pop your Enduring Cry and save yourself at that clutch moment when you need it the most. It also helps you generate endurance charges as you're mapping as well. You're going to get times where bosses are going to be on top of you, and that's okay. This build's starting to get to a point where it can actually handle it. Rightio, so the most hectic part of this is getting the skill tree right. So you're going to start obviously at the Witch Ascendancy area or the Witch area. You'll come up and you'll get the cast speed. Cast speed is really important in this build. So Arcanus Dominion, then we get Heart and Soul, Practical Application. This means that you can't be interrupted, but actually we don't even need this anymore because we don't need it, but we do need it for the resistances and the strength and dex. And then you come up, you get elemental damage, Firewalker, obviously we're casting fire spells, so that's good. We get increased cast speed again. We come up, we get Cruel Preparations, we're going to go all the way up and get Breath of Flames. Now we could get another thing in here, we could get Fire Exposure, you inflict does extra damage, or cover ash, cover enemies in ash when hit, but we're using Infernal Cry, so we don't really need that. Everything else is not really relevant, so we can ignore that for now. So then we'll come across and we'll talk about the cluster jewels last because they're the things that I add in very last. So then we come down and we get Holy Fire and Fire Mastery, 2% life when you ignite non-ignited enemies. This gives you increased life regeneration as you're mapping. Then we go and get Purity of Flesh. We also grab Sovereignty and Reservation Mastery. So that gives us reservation reduction. Then with my particular build on this, I've got Arcane Capacitor, and the reason why is it increases our mana sustain further. We can also get Clarity as 100% increased mana reservation efficiency, so we can run a full Clarity gem without having to lose any of the efficiency of running it. Now if we didn't run that, like we'd still have a good pool, but I just don't feel like it'd be as sustainable as what it is currently. Even though it's 39 mana to cast, we could play with that a little bit. Though technically we could rip that out, and then the next level we go up, we could get another blowback node in there. So there's a few things we could do with that. So I'll have a play with that, but right now this is working for me. Then we come down, we get Divine Judgment. In here we want 40% increased effect of non-damaging ailments. This will increase your damage with Ignite. And then we come across and we pick up some rudimentary nodes here and grab discipline and training. This will give you increased LE damage, elemental resistances, and obviously huge chunk of life to add to your pool. By the time we're done, we should be at like 6,000 HP. So it's not a small amount of health, but not a large amount either. So then we come down here, we'll come across and we'll grab Tireless. This reduces the cost of skill casting. We're going to get Arsonist. This increases our dot as well as our fire mastery for increased dot as well. Then we'll come up and grab Combat Stamina. We want to get Determination, has 25% increased mana efficiency. So then we save a bit of mana on that. And then we get another Jewel Socket for another Hypnotic Eye. Now, you could get a Helm Enchant for Determination. Entirely up to you how you want to do it. Like, you know, that could be a way that you get around this and then save a bit of mana and then you can make it more sustainable. But I'm still in progress with this, so, you know, there will be other changes. I'm more so looking at, like, you know, maybe getting Sanctum of Thought for survivability, or, you know, we'll do something else with clusters up here. But anyway, let's talk about clusters. So, we want to pick up the armor nodes first. This is no-brainer. We want to stack armor, survivability. So we've got Widespread Destruction, Sadist, because we do both Ignite and Shock. We do 20% and then 25% increased damage with elemental attacks. And then Prismatic Heart, just a really good node to get, really cheap. And then pretty much all we're going to do is stack Flow of Life and Blowback. The reason why we want Blowback, and ignites you inflict, deal damage 8% faster. Right now we have 3, so we got 8 plus 8, 16, and then 24 up here, and then we'll go up to 32 when we get another one stacked in here, and that's going to do a shitload of damage. And that's how we melt bosses' faces off with this build. It's gratuitous. Second to that, we want Flow of Life. This is going to give us increased health regeneration, maximum health, and damage over time. And that's pretty much all there is to the setup. Like, that's all we're doing. This is like real dumb level brain power here. These aren't expensive jewels. Like, they're pretty affordable. I don't know how they're going to fare after this video if people go, holy shit. And then basically Hypnotic Eyes through everything, except for the Corrupted Blood one, which I had to get with Dexterity. And cast speeds with fire skills. I really lucked out with this sail here, and I can't be maimed as well on this build. And then basically just stack Hypnotic Eyes all through the build for wherever you get a spare jewel socket until you get to here. So also up here, we've got another large cluster, and we get this, like, we're at level 90 now, so you can fit all this up to level 90 if you follow the tree exactly. And then we'll get Burning Bright, gives us AoE and burning damage, two big advantages when you're playing tot builds. We get disorienting display. And the reason why is 10% chance nearby enemies will be blinded, so a little bit of a defensive layer there. And then we get Chromator, so enemies we ignite, enemies killed by hits are destroyed. I don't know if this really works with what I'm doing, but, you know, is what it is. And this is so, like, shit like the spine dudes can't kill you easily and things like that. And, you know, shoot out those fizz damage spikes. Also 30% flat fire damage, so really good node to get. And then we've also got a Watcher's Eye in here, and this is a 35C Watcher's Eye. So we have a look at this. Yeah, it'll be different rolls. So this particular Watcher's Eye, just straight flat fire damage, and then regenerate 1.35% life. We can min-max it a little further if we want with Divine Orbs. But yeah, that's pretty much it. It's a no-brainer. And it's like 35C. It's flat maximum health percentage, fire damage, and regen. And regen while you got vitality. And we run all of these skills, so it's really useful. Just a complete hidden gem in the rough sort of situation. And then up here, just for good measure, we got Surging Vitality because we can. Now, I might rip this out and that Clarity node and chuck in another Blowback node, and that would make my character even crazier. And the POB that you can see does that. It'd be 32% increased burn rate. It's basically just like lighting people's faces on fire at that stage. Would reduce our survivability a little bit, but quite frankly, we already do a dumb amount of basically damage or dumb amount of regen anyway, so it's not a big like game changer. It'd just be a little bit of a tweak. And then we could chuck another Hypnotic Eye back in it anyway, so it wouldn't make any real difference. We'd still get life and do even more damage. We'd just kill enemies quicker than having that Surging Vitality. So I'll have a play with that and see how I go. for ascendancies, really basic stuff on this build. So we'll go straight for Shaper of Flames. First thing we get Shaper of Flames, then we go for Mastermind of Discord, and then we go for Heart of Destruction. And we get Convergence when you hit a unique enemy, no more than once every 8 seconds. And this is basically 30% increased elemental damage. So this scales up and does more damage as you attack unique bosses or map bosses or bosses, whatever. And then we get Shaper of Storms. The reason why we get Shaper of Storms is we do a shock skill, and basically all damage can shock, and then it basically just increases the amount of damage. Now, I'm not sure of the effectiveness of the shock, because if we get to anything like 50 or 60%, we just go straight over 10.8 million DPS, and we're just like, down the street halfway to Steve's house. But yeah, that's pretty much it for the actual skill tree itself. Very straightforward, very easy to play. Nothing crazy. It is abusing clusters, but them's is the way we get these fire dot builds working. Could you use this for any other dot build? Yeah, pretty much. This will pretty much work with any fire dot build fundamentally. I haven't really looked at anything else yet, but maybe Fireball with like a really good staff with fire dot or something like that could really amp up and be awesome as well. But we can do some modeling later in the piece with this build. But yeah, that's the tree. All right, so Pantheon, this one I took a little bit to get right. So we have Soul of Tukahama. This gives us stationary damage reduction and regen. And then I'm also leveling up Soul of Arakali. So 10% damage taken, reduced damage taken over time. And then obviously everything else debuffs and everything, and chaos resistance to damage over time as well. All of this is really good to keep this build alive. Dot seems to be a real problem for this build, and this was one way that I have somewhat mitigated that problem. But if anyone has a better setup and they're trying this build, then by all means. I did try Soul Solaris. It just wasn't enough. But I could try it again. I'm not really losing sleep over it. But yeah, that's pretty much the Pantheon. Yeah. Okay, so I hope this build is really interesting. Something new to try and play with and get working. It's incredibly cheap to play. It's approachable for all players, even a dum-dum like me in Path of Exile, who is never going to make mirrors like other various players. But, if you don't have a lot of time, this build will do justice. This build is really tailored for like hammering maps and also like map bosses and like the unique bosses, like the guardians and everything. It can take them all down pretty easily. It's not so much made for delve or anything. It's good for ritual. It's good for strongbox farming. It's good for legion farming as well, because it's got such huge AoE and dot and damage. Yeah, just don't take it in delve. It's not going to work in delve. That's why we got our max block RF build. That's a deep delver there. Anyway, until next time, like and sub to the channel, not the video. And all this will be POB. Everything will be in the description. And feel free to have a discussion about it in the comments or DM me or whatnot and ask me questions. But anyway, until next time, have a good one and bye.